This is another Pocket Color mod. We are going to put a bunch of Game Boy Color components and some Game Boy Pocket components onto this board, and it will fit the brains of a Game Boy Color inside of a Game Boy Pocket shell. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for this one. This is the third time I've done something like this, but this one, actually in like both ways, this is kind of the third time I've done something like this. This is the third time I've done a Pocket Color, and this is the third time I've done a new board with reusing old components. I've done two of Natalie's Pocket Color mods, the Pocos, and I've done the Funny Playing new GBA board, and I've done the Frog Boy Color, which, funny we mentioned Frog Boy Color. I actually don't need to mention this because this video isn't sponsored by them, but the main channel video is sponsored by PCBWay because this is on PCBWay. You can get this from PCBWay, link in the description. But also, I'm not going to lie and be like, I got this sent to me by PCBWay because I didn't. I actually didn't think about this. I could have had them do this board for me, and then it would have been much easier to do the sponsorship. But I actually bought this from Inside Gadgets. You can also buy it from them, but they just get it from PCBWay, I'm pretty sure. So you could just do it from PCBWay and skip the middleman. Nothing against Inside Gadgets. They're great. I've used their stuff before. I'm probably going to use their stuff in the future. Their cart reader rewritable thing is awesome, but PCBWay gives me money. So go check out. I'll have both of them linked down below. I probably won't be able to link Inside Gadgets link in the main channel video, but that's right. I doubt PCBWay is actually going to watch this video, and if you are, hi Elaine. Anyways, let's get started on this. This is not a tutorial. You can follow along with this, and you should be able to do this no problem. But this will be a walkthrough, and I actually will show a majority of the steps. I've actually done something crazy that I don't normally do. I have done this mod 4 times now. It is not complete. I actually haven't tested any of these. We'll probably test them later on in the video, but I did these in the days leading up to recording this because I wanted to give some tips and tricks that I found along the way. We are starting off with doing some microscope work. I'm going to tape this down to my microscope here, just with a little Kapton tape. But if you don't have Kapton tape, any tape should honestly work just fine. We're going to remove this in a bit anyways, so it really doesn't matter. But the first thing I'm going to do is just try and line this up on all of these pins. I highly recommend getting some sort of like dental pick like this, because it'll make it a lot easier messing around with this stuff. Learn that with the PS2 video. And if this wasn't obvious already, this is not a beginner-friendly mod whatsoever. This is a very hard mod. So don't even, honestly, most people probably shouldn't attempt this mod. Straight up. Not trying to gatekeep, because I do think this is a cool mod. Spoiler for the review that I haven't even played on this yet. But I've played on Pocket Color mods before. I also haven't written the review yet. But this is a very hard mod, and you're about to see just how hard it is. So now that we've got these lined up on these pins here, I'm going to put some flux down over in this corner, trying to set it without moving the chip here like that. Dang it. And this is infinitely harder to move now that there's flux on this chip. Nice. Ooh, is that close enough? I think I should adjust it slightly. Too much. No. This looks crooked, but it also looks good. Oh no, I have to sneeze. Please, no. Okay, holding it back, keeping it at bay, hopefully, maybe. I'm getting nervous because the tingling, sneezing sensation is not going away. But in the meantime, I'm going to clean my soldering iron, the tip, as it's warming up here. And I like to get this to like 330C. Having it a little bit warmer is going to be easier on us. Honestly, I might even bump it up to 350. And I just put a little bit of solder on my tip because we're just going to try and secure this down like that. Beautiful. It's globby, it's bad, it's gross, but it works. I did just make it a little more crooked, I think, but it still lines up, oddly enough. So from here, I'm going to put flux all around all of these sides because we now have it locked down on the 2 separate corners. And I'm just going to drag the solder across all the pins. And I didn't really move the microscope around because I can kind of see, and I know I should be showing you guys. But for the most part, just dragging your iron around across all these pins with some flux, just doing this and drag soldering should get the job done. You're gonna have some bridges like this, and then what you can do is clean your iron, and then you put some flux down over the bridge, and you can drag it around again if you want, or you can just take your iron, clean it off again, put it down, clean your iron again, put it down until it's gone. And we can look all across this here, and it looks like we don't have any bridging, which is nice. Later we will go check all of these pins to see if they move, but for now we're just going to go over to the other side, and all of these look pretty good. We're going to look for some bridges. Oh, we've got some missing solder over here. Got a lot of missing solder over here, so I'm going to lock in over here. And this is one of the pain points I've noticed with this. One of my biggest complaints about this mod is some of these components, like this capacitor right here, is just placed not very well. It's kind of annoying because it is very much in the way of my soldering iron. But I'm gonna put some more flux down here. It can be kind of hard to solder on this area without taking the capacitor with you, which is not something I want to do. And sometimes you might bend a pin like that, and that's where the dental tool comes in handy. So I can get in there and attempt to move it back. And now I'm moving more of them. This is not great. We're gonna need some flux. Did I just mess this one up entirely? Oh, I removed that pin. Nice. Of course, I don't have a single failure until I turn the camera on. I may have just ruined this entire board. Fun! And there's the capacitor going with me. But now I fixed the all the bridging going on over there. Dude, okay, that wasn't annoying at all. And while I'm doing this last side, you probably noticed that I did not remove any of this stuff on camera. It's just because takes a bit of time. And since I was doing 5 of these, I just did it all at once and I didn't record it. Maybe I could have like recorded to throw some B-roll in there, but if you look at the GitHub or whatever it's on, you can see which parts you need. I will have the list of aftermarket parts that you can get that are usable with this. Because I recommend using like aftermarket AAA battery connectors and stuff. That way you don't have to gut a Game Boy Pocket. But if you really want to see me remove these items, you can go watch the Frog Boy video, the second channel one. Then I show off removing all of those, I do believe. Maybe not like the headphone jack and the power jack and stuff, but apparently there is an aftermarket power jack for this. I did not know that. I'm using all original ones, but you'll need to reuse the headphone jack, not necessarily the power jack. You pretty much have to get his DC board, which is kind of annoying, but it's probably better for IPS mods anyways, so whatever, that's fine. Crystal, RAM, and obviously the CPU. You also pretty much need the power switch. There are like aftermarket adapter boards that have like aftermarket power switches. Those don't really work very well. Maybe it does here, but I haven't tried it. That is part of my review of this, is that there are plenty of aftermarket parts that he could have put on this board that I wish he would have just done, like a headphone jack, apparently power jack, the volume wheel, the link port, power switch. Could have just made it for aftermarket power switch, because those are going to be better than reusing the old gross dirty ones and having to clean it up, and those just not being as good even though they're cleaned up because, you know, they're still worn out. And just having to swap the RAM and the CPU would have been really nice. Adding the power board. Crystal is kind of annoying to add, but that's also just because, like that capacitor from earlier, there's other stuff that gets in the way, so it's hard to solder down the crystal. I know I could be using hot air, but I don't do well with hot air. Removing stuff, easy. When I don't care about what else is on the board, but all these other components, I always end up moving something or melting something when I'm trying to put stuff on with hot air. So yeah, I wish there would have been more of the aftermarket components on this. I don't think there's any aftermarket cart slots, so that's just a bummer in general, but the cart slot is pretty hard to remove, at least for me. But yeah, I'm not removing any of this stuff in this video. Now I'm gonna add our RAM. We're gonna place, wow, Oh my gosh, I just placed that down perfectly, like on both sides, with my finger. That was insane. Anyways, I'm gonna hopefully place this flux down perfectly. And I'm gonna do the same gosh darn thing. Add a little bit of flux to my tip, and I'm going to carefully try and lock it down. Ooh, I pushed it back a little bit, but I think it's fine. It's still lined up, and we're just gonna do more and more drag soldering till all of those look nice and shiny. Oh, that one's still gold. We don't want it to stay gold like Pony Boy. And that looks good. Oh yeah, even though it got pushed down, there's still plenty. And more drag soldering. Clean the tip. And then just put a little bit more flux down. And that cleans it up instantly. Okay, before we get to the crystal, I'm going to take a second to poke around with this guy and make sure all of these pins are soldered down. Just going to do a light push on all of them, and that row is good. Move up to the top, and we can see that all of these are good. They're not moving, they're fine. Then we can do the same thing over here on the CPU. Nothing. Scooch it over a little bit. Nothing. Go to the right side. Pushing up this time, just because it's easier from this angle. Nothing on that part. Obviously, we'll have one move here. That's unfortunate, but we are going to hope that this one is not necessary. Bottom side is good. We do have a little bit of bridging right there that I just took out with my pick. Nice. And, oh, did that one move? And we are good. All of those are good. The hard part of soldering is done. Before we get rid of the microscope here, I am going to do the soldering for the power switch. I'm going to put some flux down. Shocker. I'm going to get quite a bit of solder on my tip here once it heats up. Ooh, that is nice and lined up. I'm going to get this side soldered down, and then I'm going to get this side soldered down. I'm going to press down on it to make sure it's flat. And then I'm going to go back over to this side, pressing down, keep it flat. And then we can add solder to the last two pins. That looks good. We can put our power switch back in, make sure everything's cleaned using some isopropyl alcohol, a toothbrush, a Q-tip, paper towel, using a fiberglass pen, and we can lock these tabs down. Again, I like to put pressure on it as I'm soldering it down, keeping it nice and flat. And then the other side, add some solder. Why are we not going, people? There we go. Add some solder, and then I'll push down as it's heated up, just like I did on the other side. You can't really see that, but it looks nice and flat now. It's going to be kind of hard to show that on camera, so I'm not going to bother. But our power switch is installed, and now's the time to check to make sure it slides back and forth as it should. Cool. From here, oh yeah, LED is also not something that they install. That's another thing that they should really just have on there. Probably good reasoning for some of this stuff. I'm just a complainer. No offense to Bucket Mouse. Anyways, next I'm going to install the volume switch. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to put some flux down here. You don't really need to put flux down here. It's just easier. I think this will be the last thing I use the microscope for. But I'm once again going to put a lot of solder on my tip, and I'm going to push down flat on the volume wheel. And then once I think it's nice and flat, I'm going to just put the solder over at least one side. I'm just going to do it to both because I put a lot of solder on my tip. And we can clean that up if we want to, but it looks good enough for me. And then we can flip it over, put some flux down here, and we're going to solder these pins down. This we're going to attempt to. Pressing down kind of hard actually on these pins, and then it'll get the solder to go to the gold contacts below. You might need to hold down the pin with some like tweezers or something when you let go. And you can test these to like see if they move if you want to. But I think these look good, so we're done. And I think that's where I'm going to put the microscope away. Let's zoom way in here. And we're going to do the soldering for the crystal now. There are two different types of crystals on Game Boy Colors. There's one like this with the 4 dots. And there's some that have lines on the top and bottom, and that's it. You can use either one here. And it's okay if you get solder on pads that you're not going to use. It is totally fine. But I like to fill these up with some solder before I place it down. The writing is going to face this way. This makes any sense? The bottom of the writing faces towards the CPU on both the crystal and the RAM, if I didn't say that already. Probably wouldn't hurt to do this under the microscope, but I've once again removed a component because it's too close to something I have to solder down. You may call it a skill issue if you want. You may tell me to get a smaller soldering iron tip. I say there's plenty of room, it could be moved, respectfully. I've also been having a very frustrating time today, so I apologize if I'm coming off as a little rude. It's been a day, it's been a night, it's been a week, and a lot of it is my fault. So I'm going to do the right thing and take my anger out on everybody else. But we have soldered the crystal on both sides. From here, what should we do next? Let's do the power jack. We are going to shove this on the front of the board. Clean my tips iron, my iron's tip. Wow. And I'm going to put a little flux just on this tip right here because the solder is a little too bulbous and it won't fit in correctly. Then I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the volume wheel. We're going to call this the smush and solder technique because we're going to do this a lot. It's one of my favorite moves that I probably didn't invent. I'm going to make the power jack nice and flat and then solder that middle post. Then we should have it locked enough that we can add solder to the other posts a little more properly. Putting some flux down and boom, and boom, boom, and boom. Now guess what we're going to do with the headphone jack? That's right, the same darn thing. But this one actually kind of clicked into place, so it shouldn't be an issue. So I'm going to properly do the soldering for all of these. Stinky. And then I'm going to do the link port. What are we going to do? Smush and solder. This is also kind of locked in, but it's not as locked in as the headphone jack. So I will put a bunch of flux down. My iron is already kind of full of flux or solder. Lock down that pin, lock down that pin. Let's add the rest the proper way, or the sort of proper way. Then from here, we can put the cart slot in. Line it up with the holes. I broke off the clips on the cart slot on the sides. Just makes it a lot easier to remove and to put on. Plus, it's not really necessary to secure it. And once again, load this up with flux. I guess it is nicer to have it clipped in to like start the soldering, but we're gonna do the smush and solder. I need more solder. Both ends are soldered down. We can do it properly the rest of the way. That wasn't sped up. That's just how fast I am. Anyways, what else are we missing? Now let's do the power board. One thing that I have not done this whole time is I have not been doing this bit of soldering because I didn't read the GitHub until last night. But if we're going with AAA batteries, which I will be, we need to connect these two holes here. So I'm going to flood it with solder and flood it with solder and just trying to bridge this so I don't have to get any wires out. Actually, I have an idea. We'll do this later, but we're still going to need to put solder there. So why not put some solder there? For the power board, we've got this guy, the actual board, and then we've got pins like this. We got a set of 4 pins and then a set of 3 pins. We're going to take our 3 pin and put it in the 3 pin. I'm putting the long pins in on this side, so the short pins are sticking out on the front of the board, and I'm just holding it there. And we're going to do not the smush and solder technique, what I'm going to call the pull and solder technique. Same thing, but we're going to pull instead of push. So I'm going to take my tweezers, I'm going to hold on to these pins and pull with all of my might, solder that down, and solder the other side down a little bit. Ooh, need some flux over there. And we can clean this up a little bit. Cool. Then we're going to do the same thing to the other side and clean this. And then we can flip the board over, and you guessed it, place this down on these sets of pins. There we go. And since gravity is helping us here, we do not need any fancy smush or pull techniques. We can just do it the good old-fashioned way. And we're pretty much done. We're getting close. But let's go back to that bridging that we needed to do. I'm assuming that we're probably going to need to trim these pins down on this little power board. So I'm going to trim this off, and I'm going to use these pins, at least just one of them, to bridge the gap. And there we go. It's perfectly bridged, as all things should be. Wait, no, that's not the quote. Next thing we can do, and pretty much the last thing we can do, besides the speaker, is put the battery contacts in. I'm not a fan of putting the battery contacts in. It's a pain in the butt, but it's something we got to do. So I'm going to put it down. I'm going to flip it over, and we're going to smush and solder. Put some flux down. I'm going to smush it by putting pressure on my iron. Actually, I'm going to smush it by pinching it with my tweezers here. Not really helping. Okay. It's in enough, and I'm just going to flood it with solder now and bend it back into its spot. And then I'll do the same thing with the other side. You can like try and tape it down, but that doesn't always work for me. And now that this is pretty much fully assembled, the last thing we need to do is add the speaker. But there's a lot of gross sticky flux on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to soak this in some alcohol, 99% isopropyl alcohol to be exact. Normally I say 70% is fine, and maybe it still is, but in this case, since we're going to be dumping a bunch of it, literally soaking it in some alcohol, I would say 99% is probably best. If you let it sit there for like 10 minutes, you can come take a toothbrush or something, and that flux will just come right off. It's very nice. So that's what I recommend we do. You can also add an LED. I guess you probably don't have to, but you can use whatever LED you want. And I'm not going to put one on here yet because I'm going to be like a cooking show and put this off to the side. I'm going to put this in the metaphorical oven and get out my freshly prepared one that I just added the battery tabs to and did the bridging that I needed to. I just realized that this was zoomed in the whole time. Dang it. Not this one, because this one also doesn't have an LED. This one, because it does have an LED, and we're going to do the rest of this mod with this one. And I'm not putting an LED in the other one yet, because whenever I do go to finish that board, I will then have an idea of which shell and buttons I want to use, and I would want to match that LED to the shell and buttons, instead of just having a boring red one, which the red Game Boy will have a red LED. I don't know which LED is which because they're all clear when they're off. So let's open this one just so we can get a back, and we'll see if I did this right. This is the white LED, so we will be doing the atomic purple one. But it turned on at least. That's cool. Don't know if there's sound yet or not. We can add our speaker. And I've got a stack of Game Boy Color / Game Boy Pocket speakers here. I'm just going to add this original one. As far as I'm aware, there's no amp on this board. I could be wrong. I know that the guy that makes this also makes amps for Game Boy Colors and maybe Pockets, but he does say in the GitHub that you can use an original speaker or an aftermarket one. And I'm just going to do this here. There we go. Now that we've got that down, we can flip the board over and get out our mod kit. I'm going to put down the soldering iron. Make sure when you get your Game Boy Color IPS kit that it is the High-Speed Edo Q5 Game Boy Color kit. Game Boy Pocket kit, I don't think will work, and they did not clean up the flux on this. That's interesting. Oh, it looks like this is one of those mods that has the shining LED. Interesting. But I'm going to unclip the screen here, and we're going to do all of the soldering for these wires here. Thankfully, they're all labeled right there. I'm not sure why there's an up and a down, but we're just going to solder these wires real quick. I could shorten them, yes, that would be smart, but I'm too lazy. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and do this now as well. I also recommend trimming down the cart slot pins here, just because they do poke out a bit. It's also easier to trim them down before you remove them. It'll make removing the cart slot a little easier, in my opinion. But since I didn't do that here, because I was experimenting with which one would be easier, trimming first, then removing is the answer. But we don't want these pinching our screens, poking through our screens more accurately, or shorting the board that is going to lay right on top of it. So from here, we should finally be able to get some stuff done. I'm going to re-clip this in. Then I'm going to attach this insulating film to the back of the screen. I'm just going to kind of bust through this because you probably don't need help with this if you've done the mod up to this point. And I'm going to take these off to the side, and I'm not going to put this on yet because it's going to come off multiple times anyways. I'm going to, does that even work in this? This is not meant for a Game Boy Pocket. What we're going to do is just cut this into strips. Just do the top and bottom, then little strips. Then we can peel the peel on the screen. We can shove this all the way up top there. And the actual screen itself for the Hue 5 mod is the same as the Game Boy Pocket one. So if you get Funny Playing's pre-trimmed shell or High Speed Ito's pre-trimmed shell, my goodness, it'll fit right in there, and you shouldn't have to worry about it at all. And the reason why I didn't put the second film on just yet is because I'm actually going to desolder these stupid touchpads. I dislike them very, very much. And I've answered this plenty of times before, but you want to desolder them instead of tearing them off or cutting them off or any other way. You actually want to desolder it, even if you just like fold it into a spot that's not going to be touched, like behind the motherboard. You can still get phantom touches. It's annoying. The best way to do it is desolder that. You still might end up getting phantom touches from it. It's stupid, but that's the best way to handle it. I'm actually going to stick this down like that. We're locking that board down. You don't have to do that. That was just a me thing. And then put the insulating film over the top of that. Sounds like Amazon's here. And I just realized I didn't get any buttons. So while the dog barks at Amazon, I'm going to go get some buttons for this. And while trying to hide these wires as best as possible, it'd probably just be easiest to trim them up. And I'll do that for the future ones, but maybe. But for now, we're just going to twist that up, smush it down. And I forgot there's no screen lens on here because I also forgot to grab a screen lens. So we are going to dump these screws out. I'm going to screw the 3 Phillips screws in. Then I'm going to lift these 2 tabs up, slot this in here, lock that down. For some reason, my LED was not fitting into the hole, and I just pushed it in, and it's fine. Just shove her in there, and you can't see my wires at all. That is nice. Aftermarket power switches for the Game Boy Pocket suck. The plastic pieces, they don't hardly fit. What you have to do is you got to trim it down like that, and like that, and like that. Goodness. And sometimes you even got to trim these things down. So let's see. It's going to be tough, but it works. Then we can swap to our tri-wing, put the last 6 screws in, hopefully be done with this. If this doesn't work, I'm going to stop recording and go cry. Putting our AAA batteries in, we can turn her on and she works. And the reason why I left the screen lens off is because I wanted to see if we did have the logo LED, which, by the way, if you didn't know, the logo, the light up logo on the Game Boy Color, that is just a bar across the bottom. That's it. But we can now put our screen lens on, give it a little dusting there. Then we can put our screen lens on for protection. And I'm going to put the battery cover on because why not? And select A and B to open the menu, B and A to navigate, select an A to go into the menu, A to go up, B to go down. We can do a brightness of 15. We can hit select an A to set it. Then we can go B down to vertical position, select an A, and let's bring this all the way down. Select an A to put it back into position, and then B to go down to the horizontal position, select an A to enter, B to go over to the left a little more, select an A to set it, B to go through. We're going to get rid of retro pixel. I don't like any of these, so we're just going to go back to normal, select an A to set. Do we want the battery on or off? We'll take it off. The logo color, we want to be disabled, and then we're good. Cool. But let's turn it off with the really hard to swap power switch. We can slot in our Game Boy game, and it's a Game Boy Color, so it's going to have the Game Boy Color boot. We can go down to controller test because that's all I really care about. A, B, right, left, down, up, select. I'm gonna hold B, and our volume wheel has full control. Cool. I'm gonna turn that down because it's really loud. It works, and that's just it. It works. So I'm done here. I'm gonna go play this so I can review it properly. Peace.